Today's sermon is called Following the Leader. We have been, as a church, going through 3 books this month: Numbers, Jonah, and Amos. Amos, however you want to say it. Today, we're going to talk about Amos. So if you want to, you can head over to Amos 7:10 through 15. 7:10 through 15. This is what it says. Then Amaziah, the priest of Bethel, sent word to Jeroboam, king of Israel, saying, Amos has conspired against you in the midst of the house of Israel. The land is unable to endure all his words. For thus Amos says, Jeroboam will die by the sword, Israel will certainly go from its land into exile. And Amaziah said to Amos, Go, you seer, flee away to the land of Judah, and there eat bread, and there do your prophesying. But no longer prophesy at Bethel, for it is a sanctuary of the king and a royal residence. Then Amos replied to Amaziah, I am not a prophet, nor am I the son of a prophet, for I am a herdsman and a grower of sycamore figs. But the Lord took me from following the flock, and the Lord said to me, Go prophesy to my people Israel.
Amen.
So here's Amos. And Amos is a herdsman and a grower of sycamore trees. That's what he is. He wasn't a prophet, meaning that he wasn't a person who did this for a living. Okay? There were prophets throughout Israel who would do it for a living. But that's not Amos. Amos made his living through being a herdsman and growing sycamore figs. And he wasn't a son of a prophet. Now, this doesn't mean like there was this tradition of like, hey, my dad was a prophet, now I'm a prophet. That's not what it was. Son of was a terminology for people who studied under a prophet or studied their teachings, who spent years and years trying to understand the prophet's teachings, i.e. a person who went to seminary. I mean, that's really what it was. He wasn't educated in any of that. He was just a guy who dealt with animals and dealt with trees. And God called him not only out of what he was doing, but actually out of his nation to travel to another nation to speak against it, to prophesy against it. To give you an idea of this, this was during the time in which the nation of Israel was split into 2 nations. There was Judah and there was Israel. And Amos came from Judah. And he was sent to Israel to speak against that nation and that king. So let's go and we're going to talk just a little bit about Jeroboam. So Jeroboam was actually Jeroboam II. He was king of Israel. And Jeroboam had done more good for Israel than most kings. In a few ways. One, Israel had lost a lot of territories that God had given them. Other nations had come in and taken them away. Jeroboam took them back. Jeroboam went out and he took back what was Israel's to begin with. Second, There was actually more peace during Jeroboam II's time than most other kings. Most of the time, there was some giant invader, Assyria, the Babylonians, the other people, who would come in and they would take over. And they would bring out Israelites into their own cities. That's where we get the stories of like Daniel. But during Jeroboam II's time, there was actually a lot of peace. A lot of peace throughout the land of Israel. People were feeling good. And finally, Jeroboam II brought wealth to the nation of Israel. Not only just to the upper echelons of society, but actually more Israelites gained wealth and moved up in their economic status under Jeroboam than almost any other king. It was a pretty good life. It was good. But Jeroboam II also did a few other things. He allowed for idol worship, worshiping of other gods. And while so many Israelites had moved up in their economic status, with that, there was more mistreatment of the poor than at almost any other time in the nation's history. There was oppression. They were treated horribly. And so Amos came to speak to all this. Now this was Jeroboam who brought about all of this. And like I said, a lot of the nation probably looked at Jeroboam and thought, man, this is a good king. We're living a good life. There's peace in the land. Like, we're not going hungry because we have more wealth than before. And Israel is more whole than it has been in a long time because what was taken from us is back in our hands again, thanks to Jeroboam. They probably thought things were going really well. And you would think if Jeroboam II, the king, the leader, was the one who did all of this, he's the one who brought it about, that mostly this word would be for Jeroboam. Right? It would be for the king. It's for the leader. He's the one who led Israel into this time. He's the one who allowed for these evils to happen. He's the one who allowed for the worship of other gods, the mistreatment, the oppression of the most vulnerable in society. He allowed for that. And yet, if we go to Amos 3:1, Amos 3:1, it says, "Hear this word which the Lord has spoken against you, sons of Israel, against the entire family which he brought up from the land of Egypt." This word wasn't just for the leader, it just wasn't just for the king. It's the entire family of Egypt, entire family of Israel that has brought about these oppressions, that has brought about this worship, that has allowed this to happen. And so, who does God raise up? Not the learned, not the person who would have had this office, not the guy paid to do the work. No, he brought up a herdsman and a grove of sycamore trees from another nation to come up and speak against it. Speak against the oppression. Speak against the worship. To the entire family. not just to the kid, to the entire family. This is so important. In case you didn't know, I'm more in this story like, not like Amos, right? I would be the guy who is learned, right? The sons of the prophet, the guy who studied under it. I'm the guy who also gets paid for doing the work that he's doing. I'm not like Amos. And I remember during my time learning and going to Bible college, there was this camp. It was called Camp Courtney. Camp Courtney was a Foursquare, which is our denomination, owned camp out in North Carolina. And it was the camp that everyone on the East Coast went to at some point. Like it was huge. And to the point that until they switched the districts around, they really had Virginia, the Carolinas, they had Alabama, Georgia, Florida, Tennessee. They just had this huge amount of people who would go out there. And, certain names grow in the Foursquare family that you would hear and be like, oh, that guy, he was a big thing in the Foursquare church, or that woman was a huge thing in the Foursquare church. They wrote these books, they spoke at these things, everyone knew their name, type of thing. And those were the people who actually went to this camp, even as kids. It was a huge deal. And I remember we went there. Actually, it was the place that my wife and I got married. And then as soon as we got married there, they closed the camp, so that can't be a good sign. But we went there with our school that had just moved to Virginia. It was our second year there. And it was the third year of the school total of its whole life. Like I came in the second. I was the second class. And the first class that did a second year, because they were a one-year program, not even a college. And then I came in and came to college second year. Michelle was there, my wife, and we go and we are cleaning this camp. We're getting it ready to reopen, but it wasn't to reopen, it was to sell. And we're gathering leaves and we're burning the leaves, because that's what they do out there, which is a lot more fun than putting them into garbage bags and sending them to wherever. Okay, so we were working hard, we did all this stuff, and that night we did an activity. And it was a values exercise. And so what our leader did was, the director of the school, a very authoritative, powerful guy. Have you ever met someone that you're like, he walks in the room, or she walks in the room, and you go, oh man, I want to hear what that person has to say. That was this kind of person. He had that persona about him. He loves the Lord. Amazing guy. He married my wife and I. And so he does this exercise. And what he does is he goes, we're a brand new school. And we're trying to get together our website. We're trying to get together our promotional material. Because this has changed from what it was. It was a one-year discipleship program with no actual college credits. Now it's a 2-year college where you're getting AA. So we need to work on our promotional stuff. And he said, I want you as a group, we're all going to get together, all 40 of us or however many it was, and we are going to decide what are the 3 most important values for Ignite. And when you guys agree on it, we'll put it on the website. It'll become our promotional stuff forevermore. And I see, so my sister-in-law, my brother, both went to the same school. They did this activity multiple years in a row. So you can kind of see maybe where I'm going with it, maybe not. So we're sitting around and everyone's firing off stuff. They're like, well, we value family. And then, someone's like, well, my dad left my family when I was a kid. And my mom took it out on us. So I don't value family. I don't. What's bigger to me is that now I have a community. And then people are like, yeah, but my community back home sucks. So we need to do family. No community. No family. It was this huge fight. I mean, honestly. And every single value that you could think of was like this. I mean, honestly. It was like, we value truth. But people are like, yeah, but people who are honest and truthful, or brutally honest and truthful, the ones who are saying it, you guys are mean. I was one of those people. It was like, had to learn a little about the truth in love type of thing. And then the other people are like, no, love is more important. And it's like, well, yeah, but truth is also important. Yeah, but we only get 3 values. Right? So we need to choose wisely. And it's not about what's most important for me as an individual, or even for Christians, or anything like. It's for this school. What's important? So it's like, well, education. Yeah, but it was a discipleship program first, which has more to do with our spiritual lives than our knowledge. I mean, it just went back and forth, and people started to get mean, like really mean. People were being cut off. People were being silenced. People were shouting out. Someone would get forth an idea, and then someone else would be like, that's dumb. I mean, it was something else. And I can't tell you how long we did this for. It felt like it was, hours, honestly. I don't know that it was. But I do know we took an either 15 or 30-minute break right in the middle. And so our leader was like, okay, guys, go take a 15 or 30-minute break. Just cool off, and we'll come back together, and we'll finish this up. So we took a break, right? And we started talking with people, because even though you're taking a break, now it's your time to form little clumps and get your ideas out there. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. That way your idea can be chosen because you got an alliance. So it's not really a break. Oh my goodness. So you get to this point, and I remember I'm talking to my friend, and I'm like, I don't even understand. Everyone's coming up with these values, but at the end of the day, don't we value God, the Bible, and people? Don't you think everyone would just agree with that? I think we're thinking of values as these untouchable things. You know what I mean? These ephemeral, I don't know, there comes some kind of smoke that you can't really grasp. Something you can't see, but they're feelings, they're deep, they're real, they're concrete, but they're not. Such as love and truth and all of these things. And I was like, but we could all agree on at this school, these are our values, is God, right? Because why else are we all here? But to get closer to Him, to learn about Him. The Bible, because it is educational, but it's educating us on the Bible. And then people, because half of what we do here is outreach. We're learning how to outreach. We always had a joke that our bachelor's, if we were to get one, would be in chair stacking. Because it's what we did. We stacked chairs and we put chairs out. All the time. And my roommate was like, no, that's exactly it. Yeah, let's ask, talk with our leader about it and ask him, if it would be a fair thing to say. And so we're like, yeah, we'll go talk to him. And one of the older girls at our school, she was like, "You guys know that this isn't real." And I was like, "What do you mean it's not real?" She's like, he's not actually going to put this stuff on a website. Like, that's not what this is about. And we're like, "No, he said he would. He said he would. Of course he would. Why would he lie?" She's like, "Well, I mean, if you think about it as a lie, I guess you could get mad about it, but no, he's not. Like, it doesn't matter if we all agree. It's not going on." And so I'm like, that can't be true. So I had to ask him. So I went and I was like, "Hey, so what if we did these 3 things? Like, would that be, like, work?" I think everyone would agree. But some people are saying, like, "You're not actually looking for the, like, you're not going to put this on." And he was like, "Yeah, I'm not. So if you could not mention those, in fact, for the next half of this activity, Josh, if you could just be quiet and not say anything." Because I agree that they will all agree with you, and then we'll miss the whole purpose of this activity. And so we come back, and he goes about 15 minutes more of us going back and forth, except me and my roommate, who are sitting there with our mouths closed, stewing, just upset. And he gets to the end and he's like, "Well, I hope you guys learned something about yourselves. Like, now I know who of you will speak out and not let others speak. Who of you need to work on speaking up because you're quiet and you're not willing to say what needs to be said. I'm able to see those of you who actually care about the others who are getting their feelings hurt. I can see those of you who are dismissive of other people's ideas without any thought process to it. Hopefully you've learned a little about this community, this family. That your backgrounds affect how you see things. And you need to care about that. And it was this deep, meaningful thing that meant nothing to me because I was still stewing over the fact that I felt like he lied. And so we take this time and we go through. And of course we never agreed. So it never went on the website. It never went up anywhere. And he was able to do this year after year with all the different groups. And I remember that night we did a little worship time. And I remember sitting there and I just got mad. I just got so mad. And then it turned into me being like upset. Okay? Me being upset. And it turned into me being like sad because here's a guy who I thought I could trust, who I thought I could like put all my belief into and just follow and know that I'm being led the right way. I felt like I took a year where there was a rule our first year, which was don't date. You know, don't date. You guys can do that later. Spend a year where you're just focusing on discipleship and relationship. And there was a bunch of people who dated the first year. And I decided to be obedient, but I'm like, come on, I want to date. And so now I'm looking back and going, well, if that was all a lie, why am I even being obedient to this guy? Why am I following him? Why am I following this leader? He lied. And I remember just this sudden peace came over me in the midst of worship. And I remember God saying, exactly. Like, I'm the only one. I'm the only one. And it took some time, but I realized it wasn't, I'm the only one that you can ever put your trust in. It's not, I'm the only one that you can ever follow. I'm the only one that you should ever listen to. But it was, I'm the only one who is perfect. I'm the only one who will never let you down. I'm the only one who will always be there. And that doesn't mean that, honestly, my relationship with my leader only grew because of that.
That's right.
It only grew.
Yeah.
Because I realized he's just another Christian brother. He's another one who just cannot earn his own salvation. Who doesn't live up to the standard of our Lord and Savior. And that's okay for him to still be my leader. And me to put trust in him. But it's not me putting trust in him because I trust him. It's me putting trust in him because I trust the Lord.
Yeah, that's right.
See, I trust the Lord, and he put this guy in charge. So even when failure comes, even when it falls apart, I'm no longer devastated. Because my trust wasn't in him because of him. It was in him because of Jesus.
That's good.
Foursquare is going through this time where we're doing a focus on abuse, spiritual abuse of power in the church. And they had this book that was one of the references for some of the documentation that they sent out to kind of lead us in what it means to not abuse power in the church, to not spiritually abuse people. And the book says this, it's a quote by Ken Blue. It says, "We must also consider all abuse, spiritual and otherwise, on a continuum. I suspect that all churches, and for that matter, all people,
That's right.
are abusive to some degree. All of our institutions are made up of fallen and sinful people. Abuse may come by passive neglect or by active manipulation, but we all treat each other with less than perfect love."
Yeah.
And when I first read this, and I wasn't, God hadn't put together all the things, I just thought to myself, well then, how is this even possible? Like why would I even want to be leading a church in any way? I mean, literally, this book is saying that I'm abusing people. Like that this church is causing abuse in some way or another. Because all churches, and all people for that matter, are abusive to some degree. And I'm like, if that's the standard, well, man, I'm not going to last long. And so it really hit me, and I was like, wow, either this is untrue, or it is true, and if it is true, then I'm in trouble, or I'm misunderstanding it, or there's more to it. And so I started to pray and seek the Lord on it, and I came to this passage, Matthew 23, 1 through 12. So Matthew 23, 1 through 12. It says this, "Then Jesus spoke to the crowds and to his disciples, saying, 'The scribes and the Pharisees have seated themselves in the chair of Moses. Therefore, all that they tell you, do and observe, but do not do according to their deeds, for they say things and do not do them. They tie up heavy burdens and lay them on men's shoulders, but they themselves are unwilling to move them with so much as a finger. But they do all their deeds to be noticed by men, for they broaden their phylacteries,'" So you know phylacteries were these boxes that were attached to the wrist and to the forehead, and they had little scrolls with certain scriptures in them. And the idea of broadening it was they just made them really big so people would notice.
Yeah.
So they broadened their phylacteries and lengthened the tassels of their garments. They loved the place of honor at banquets and the chief seats in the synagogues, and respectful greetings in the marketplace, and being called rabbi by men. So here's some guys who are abusing their power. They're abusing it. They're using it for their own gain. They want to be noticed. They want to be seen. They want to be able to tell people what to do without necessarily having to follow those same things. They want to be lifted up. They want to be honored. They really like being called rabbi. But here's what Jesus says. But do not be called rabbi, for one is your teacher, and you are all brothers. Do not call anyone on earth your father, for one is your Father, he who is in heaven. Do not be called leaders, for one is your leader, that is Christ. But the greatest among you shall be your servant. Whoever exalts himself shall be humbled, and whoever humbles himself shall be exalted. There's a quote that I wanted to read to you from a commentary about this. It's a little long, but I think it's important. And it's about those 8 to 10 verses where it says, do not be called a rabbi, do not be called father, do not be called leaders. It says this: these verses, while still commenting on the practice of the scribes and Pharisees, are addressed directly to Jesus' disciples, warning them against adopting the status-seeking attitude, rabbi and master. Probably act here as synonyms. They are titles appropriate only to the one teacher, the Christ, in relation to whom all his followers stand on an equal footing as brothers. Jesus thus, incidentally, asserts his own unique authority. He has the only true claim to Moses' seat. Over against that unique authority, his disciples must avoid the use of honorific titles for one another. We call this Christian rabbinism, or rabbinism, an exhortation which today's church could profitably take more seriously, not in relation to formal ecclesiastical, not only in relation to formal ecclesiastical titles like most reverend or my lord, bishop, but more significantly in its excessive deference to academic qualifications,
Yeah, that's right.
or to the authoritative status in the churches. Obviously, Matthew, or Jesus, was not saying, in a literal sense, don't call anyone else father. Because y'all have dads. Whether you know them or not, there's a dad involved. And that's just the name of a dad, is father. Not only that, but Paul refers to himself as a father to those that he led to salvation. So we can't take this literally, as in never have titles or never call someone by these things. But there is a significance, I think, when we look at someone, look at their educational background, and say, I'm going to follow you no matter what. I'm not ever going to question anything that you have to say. You are the one I'm putting my trust in because of the time you put in academics. Or when we say, well, everyone's given you a title. There's literally another word before your name. Pastor. Pastor Josh. And because of that title, no matter what you say, I'm never going to question it. No matter what you say, I'm just going to trust you because of the title. Again, this is not me saying that you can't trust me. I hope that you can. But it's me saying, don't trust me because of me. Because when it comes to Jesus, I'm on equal footing with you all. I am not on equal footing with him.
Yeah.
And what I've realized is that I think this is where the abuse comes from. I really do. I think the reason that we can say that someone can say that all churches are abusive is because maybe we give a little too much power to the person instead of the Word and our God. And I'll give you an example. Let's say that there's a preacher who preaches only on God's justice. Only on God's justice. Which a part of justice is consequences, it's discipline, it's judgment. All of a sudden, if that's all you hear and that's all you take away, maybe you leave and you feel like, I'll never live up, so I'm done with church.
Yeah.
Now you've left. Have you been spiritually abused? Well, in a way, because you only heard one thing. And if you gave this person all the power, and instead didn't actually look to God for a more complete picture, or His Word for a more complete picture, then yeah, you've been hurt by this person. Let's take it the other way. What if the preacher only speaks on love and never mentions God's justice? But let's say that you're a person who has felt the worst of the injustice that this world has to bring. And then this preacher, all he says is, you know what? Yeah, the world will hurt you, but you just gotta love them. And never once brings up the fact that God's a God of justice. And He does care about injustice. And He does want to right those wrongs. And there is judgment for people who bring such evil on other people. He never says that to you. And so instead you feel like you're being forced into forgiving unforgivable acts done against you. So much pain, so much hurt. So you leave the church. Or you sit there feeling abused and allowing, let's say, someone who is currently abusing you at home, in your life, to sit next to you and never once speak up about it. Now you've been abused. But that's partially because you put all your trust into a person instead of into a fallen human instead of into Jesus, instead of into His Word. I think a lot of times, sometimes the preacher could be good at balancing it out, but maybe you're not here every week. And it just happens that every week you come, the preacher's just talking about justice, or the preacher's just talking about love, and you never hear the opposite end. You never hear the wholeness of God. The wholeness of the gospel message. So once again, you're hurt. You're abused. I think this is the best explanation for the idea that every church is abusive in some way. And it's a hard thing to take. Because what this book is saying is it's not about the intentions of the person who's abusing. And I'm putting the quotations because that's what they're saying. And I'm still not totally agreeing with that word. But I'm getting where they're coming from a little more. Maybe. But it's not about the intentions.
Yeah, that's right.
It's about what actually comes of it. The problem is that what actually comes of it is partially on us in the church not doing what I did with my leader, which was to say, I put all my trust into you because of your gravitas. I put all my trust into you because you've got a doctorate. I put all my trust into you because you are that figure in my life. I put all my trust into you because you've got the title. When we do it for those reasons, no wonder we get hurt so bad.
Yeah, that's right.
No wonder. And in the end, while we may be able to look and say, well, that pastor was, that pastor, that leader, that Christian, they were abusive to the other person. Amos didn't just speak to the king. It was the whole family of Israel. The whole family of Israel that had to face up for what was going on there. So the question I have for you is, how do we show respect and yet not allow ourselves, our church, our leaders, to fall into sin? Bad habits. Or maybe even just things said being misrepresented or misunderstood in our lives. How do we stop that? And yet still be respectful. Still treat each other with love. There's a question that people have asked me multiple times since stepping in, is whether I wanted to be referred to as Josh or Pastor Josh or, whatnot. And it's a hard thing because, look, I grew up with some of you. Like, you saw me as a child. And not always in my best circumstances. Like, I remember some stuff, alright, that I'm sure you might too. And I grew up with your kids as my friends. Some of them as my babysitters. And now, after 30, officially, as of Monday, 30 years of referring to me as Josh, are you now expected to call me Pastor Josh? And am I expected to just hear Pastor Josh and be like, all of a sudden, oh yeah, that makes sense to me? But I'm going to be honest, when I hear it, it doesn't. It's like, oh, okay, that's weird. It's strange. And what I've come to after reading this and being in it, because this was the verse that got me thinking about it so hard, was this Matthew 23. Don't be called rabbi, don't be called teacher, don't be called father, don't be called instructor, depending on the translation, whatever it is. And I thought, oh man, well, what does this say about being called pastor? But obviously in the New Testament, people are called to be pastors.
Yeah, that's right.
That is what it is. So here's what I'm putting forward to you now on this question. if you want to call me pastor, out of respect for the fact that not only I believe that I was called to this, but Foursquare believes it, former pastors believe it, and for the simple fact that I accepted that calling. Not because you think that I know it all, not because you think that I've had the proper training, and not because you think that I have even earned or deserved this title, but simply because you want to show respect for the calling on my life and the fact that I decided to follow it, then fine. Do that. But only put your trust in me because you put your trust in Jesus.
Yeah, that's right.
Because I'm going to be real with you. I'll let you down. I'm not going to mean to let you down. I'm not going to try to. I really humbly ask, and I have asked, if you think that there's something wrong, that there's a bad habit, that there's something I've said that's incorrect, to come and talk to me. Again, I ask you do it respectfully, meaning maybe don't yell it out in the middle of service in front of everyone, but come and talk to me. And I'm always willing to remedy mistakes that I put forward, because I think the calling is a heavy one, and I don't want to lead anyone astray. But I humbly ask that, because otherwise I will let you down. Because in comparison to Jesus, guess what? We're on equal footing. We're on equal footing. Okay? I will tell you right now, I have had a lot more college education on the Bible than Pastor Steve. But I'll tell you right now, he studied the Bible for a lot longer than I have. And if it's just education that we should follow, like, we're in trouble, because I still listen to him. You know? It's important. It's important that we understand this. Because otherwise, we will fall into, have been abused. We will fall into that.
Yep, that's good.
Because we put our trust into humans. And like we've said before, like I've said, the way that the world will know that we're disciples of Jesus is because we love one another. Which means that we forgive one another. We walk with one another. We carry each other's burdens. We walk in step with one another. We do all these things for one another. But all of those things, they come with the belief to be told you need to be able to forgive one another means that the expectation is that we're going to need forgiveness from one another.
Yeah.
That's right.
To help carry each other's burdens, the expectation is that we're carrying burdens. Right? So, how do we show respect and yet not allow ourselves, our church, our leaders, to fall into these things? To have that feeling of being abused, to actually being abused by the words spoken in this church, by me or anyone else? Well, I'm walking it out with you. Honestly. This is a discussion we need to have. This is something I think we need to wrestle with. That's why, as I'm going to tell you right now, I think the whole, should I be called Pastor Josh or Josh thing is kind of a silly conversation. It's a little bit of a silly, argument if someone were to get really upset about it. Okay? But it's a simple way to think about, how do I show respect and yet not give undue reverence to a position that shouldn't have it? How do I not put someone on a pedestal that will affect me so badly if something goes wrong? Again, my thing that crushed me, I mean, I was so upset, was simply that my leader was trying to show us something. But the only way to really get us there, like if he had said, I want you guys to come to an agreement on 3 values, but just so you know, it doesn't really matter because we're not going to use them, it's just for an exercise. Would we have come out swinging the way we did? Would we have learned as much about each other? No way. Because, someone goes like, well, like, family for me is, my dad left and my mom was abusive to us. We would have all been like, all right, we'll just kick family off the table. Because it really doesn't matter. But because we thought it mattered, because we thought it was a lasting thing, we cared deeply about it. And that is what crushed me so badly. That's what hurt me so badly. That. I mean, comparatively to what other people have experienced, that is a small thing. And so, I ask you this week to wrestle with that. To wrestle with that. Ask yourself, how do you balance showing respect to those around you and to those in authority in your life or whatnot, and yet doing it only because of Jesus, not really because of that person? How do you do that? I want you guys to wrestle with it. I want you to talk with one another about it. And I want you to be okay if you guys disagree with each other about it. Because there's only one instructor. It's Jesus.
That's right.
Beyond that, we're all on equal footing as brothers and sisters. Which means we're all learning. And in the moment, here's the secret. In the moment, everyone thinks they're right. Okay? Even when I say I don't think I'm right all the time, I think I'm right about that statement. But hopefully we are humble enough to say, I'm not right all the time. Which means even in the moment that you're speaking, you know, I believe I'm right. Even if I believe it 100%, I could still be wrong.
That's right.
But the one who is right 100% of the time is Jesus.
Amen.
And he gave us his word,
Faithful.
and he is trustworthy
Yes.
Thank you, Lord.
beyond anyone else.
Yes.
So, let's go ahead and pray. Lord, I ask right now for this congregation that you would help us wrestle with these ideas. That you would help us become more respectful, more loving people. That we would treat those who you've called with love and respect. But Lord, help our focus not be on those people, but on you. Help our trust not be put into those people because of some qualification, but because we trust you. Help us rely on you. Help us be willing to have open conversations with one another. Help us to have loving conversations with one another. And Lord, I pray, help us be like Amos. Help us be willing, even if it's not our job, even if we're not studied for it, to be willing to speak when you tell us to be willing to call out injustices done by our own, to be willing to speak up and see change, and know that when it comes to instruction, we are on equal footing. And the one place that instruction needs to come from is you, Jesus. We trust you, we worship you, we ask that you bless the rest of this week. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Thank